This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, May 1st, only on Netflix.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, a show where I focus on crimes committed by military members and veterans. But don't worry, you don't have to know anything about the military to listen. True crime just has to be your morbid curiosity. And if that's you, welcome home. Hello, everyone. If you listened to last week's episode, you heard that I started a new podcast. It's called The Alternate, Inside America's Biggest Trials. It's a daily podcast where my co-host Tabitha and I break down one trial per season. We are also available as a video podcast, so be sure to check us out on YouTube at The Alternate Pod, or you can even watch us on Spotify Premium. On that show, we take you into the jury box and give you just the cliff notes of each day's testimony and evidence. There's no added commentary. Our vision in creating this show was to equip the public to be able to hear the cliff notes and be able to come to their own independent conclusion at the end of each trial. I am going to add the new podcast link to the show notes, so be sure to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss our daily coverage of the Massachusetts versus Karen Reed trial going on right now. All right, let's get into today's show. Today's case rings very close to the Amanda Gonzalez case that I covered just a few months ago on the show. It's a cold case, and honestly, I'm not sure that it will ever be solved. It's been over 20 years, but who knows? Anything is possible. And I do pray that one day there is justice for Jennifer Servo. Join me today as I tell you the story of Jennifer Servo. Now, let's dig in. Jennifer Lynn Servo, born Jennifer Lynn Olson, grew up in the Flathead Valley area of Montana, where she was known as an outgoing, energetic young woman. In high school, she ran cross country, cheered as a varsity cheerleader, and even enlisted in the United States Army Reserves. A decision that her mother says was partly inspired by the lighthearted Pauly Shore comedy In the Army Now. Jennifer graduated from Columbia Falls High School and went on to study journalism at the University of Montana. She graduated from college in 2002. During college, Jennifer dove into broadcasting early. She worked as a student reporter at the KPAX TV and KECI TV in Missoula and was even an anchor for Montana Public Radio. From all accounts, Jennifer was ambitious, warm, and full of life. Jennifer's mother, Sherry Abel, recalls her daughter often, saying that she wanted to be the next Katie Couric. Jennifer playfully promised to her family that one day she'd pilot her very own private jet to fly her family to New York City, complete with a limousine to whisk them to her future penthouse apartment. Those close to her genuinely believed that Jennifer had the talent and the drive to make those dreams come true. Quote, she could have gone anywhere she wanted to, end quote. And that was what one of her former colleagues said about Jennifer's bright potential. By the summer of 2002, with college behind her, Jennifer was ready for her biggest adventure yet, launching her TV news career in Texas. And she wanted to make those big city dreams a reality. In July 2002, 22-year-old Jennifer Servo packed up her belongings and moved nearly 1,600 miles from Montana to Abilene, Texas. And that was after she landed her very first full-time job as a TV reporter. The job was at KRBC TV, the local NBC affiliate in Abilene. It was a small media market, but it would give Jennifer a place to hone her skills. It was a humble start in many ways. Her starting pay was a whopping $7.50 an hour. And Abilene was far from the bright lights of New York. But Jennifer was enthusiastic. She had what she called a romantic vision of Texas. The cowboys, the boots, the hat. At her new job, Jennifer quickly made an impression as a hardworking and talented reporter. In just a few weeks, she became an integral part of the KRBC news team, eager to take on any assignment. Station anchor Downing Bowles later remarked, quote, "You could see early on that Jennifer had the tools it was going to take to move on to bigger and better things," end quote. He and others recognized that Jennifer was not only passionate, but she was competent in her on-air delivery and reporting. In her short time there, Jennifer had even handled some tough news stories, including crime and local murders. Colleagues noted Jennifer's on-air charisma and strong work ethic, saying that she was always willing to come in early, stay late to cover any story. Off camera, Jennifer grew close to some of her peers at the station, including a young weatherman named Brian, which I'm going to talk to you in a little bit, she would briefly date. By all indications, Jennifer was thriving in those first 2 months in Texas. She worked the Thursday to Sunday shift, and she often volunteered to cover extra shifts whenever anyone needed it. Her dedication was evident. But tragically, just as her career was starting to take off, only 8 weeks into the job, 8 weeks, Jennifer's trajectory was brutally cut short. The newsroom that had welcomed her with excitement and open arms, they would soon be grappling with her shocking loss instead of celebrating her first big scoop. When Jennifer moved to Texas in 2002, she didn't go alone, at least initially. In the weeks before her move from Montana to Texas, Jennifer had fallen into a whirlwind romance with a man named Ralph Sepulveda, not sure if I said that right, whom she met while training with the Army Reserve in Montana. Ralph was 34 years old, considerably older than 22-year-old Jennifer, and he had served as an Army Ranger. He was, in the eyes of Jennifer's family, a bit of a bad boy. Jennifer's sister, Krista, would later note that Ralph was very rough around the edges, way different than anyone Jennifer ever dated. After her college graduation, her relationship with Ralph moved quickly. In fact, they had known each other only a matter of weeks when Jennifer announced to the world and her family that Ralph was going to follow her to Abilene and that he would be moving and living there with her. Jennifer's family was not too keen on this idea, but Jennifer had no time to think about the possibility that it might not work out with Ralph. She was fresh out of college. She had a new love interest. She was going to be on air as a reporter. She was winning at life. However, once in Texas, her relationship with Ralph soured when she discovered Ralph's secret. This mofo had an entire fiancé in Montana, and he had a child from a previous relationship, a child which he had never told Jennifer about, which is super shady. Father of the year, this guy. Jennifer was really upset, so she broke up with Ralph and she kicked him out. This was around early August 2002. But instead of returning to Montana, Ralph set up shop right in Abilene, just a few miles from Jennifer. Within 3 weeks of the breakup, though, Ralph came back begging Jennifer to take him back. But after being free from that burden of her boyfriend for 3 weeks, Jennifer said, "No thanks." You go, girl. Jennifer had even shared with her family that she was relieved to have rid herself of Ralph. She even called him a mooch because he not only was taking advantage of her financially, basically not contributing, but he was draining her emotionally. Jennifer's mom was still worried about Jennifer and Ralph. She just felt that something was off about this bad boy. But Jennifer was like, Mom, he's harmless. But, there were red flags. Jennifer once confided in a friend from work that Ralph had a disturbingly violent sexual preference. He had tried to choke her during sex, and she didn't really like that at all. This detail, in hindsight, when I tell you what I'm about to tell you, is chilling given what would happen to Jennifer. Around the same time that Ralph was exiting Jennifer's life, another man entered the picture. Brian Travers, a man closer in age to her. He was 24 years old, and he was a weatherman who worked in the same shop as her. Jennifer and Brian hit it off as friends at work. So, with Ralph out of the apartment by mid-August, Jennifer's friendship with Brian briefly turned romantic. According to Jennifer's own diary entries, she and Brian had a short fling, and that lasted just a few days. They were intimate on 1 or 2 occasions, but Jennifer quickly decided that she wasn't interested in a serious relationship with Brian. She wrote in her journal that she just wanted to be friends with him and that she regretted that sleeping together with her colleague kind of made things awkward. Brian, for his part, he developed real feelings for Jennifer throughout the weeks. And coworkers observed that he, quote, carried a torch for Jennifer, but he respected her wishes to just be friends. By early September, Jennifer and Brian had settled into a friendly rapport, even if Brian was a bit disappointed by her rejection. Friends of Jennifer would later emphasize that Brian was, quote, the news station sweetheart, end quote, and he was not someone who would ever be violent or aggressive. Jennifer also remained on good terms with her college ex-boyfriend from Montana, Dave. By mid-September 2022, the state of Jennifer's personal life was as follows. She was single and she was crushing it at work. She was friendly with Brian. She was attempting to stay civil with Ralph. And she even had plans to meet up with her ex-boyfriend when she visited home. Or I think it was maybe in Texas. On the night of Sunday, September 15th, 2002, Jennifer Servo was going about a normal evening. She worked her usual shift that day because that was Sunday. And at around 11:30 p.m., she left the station with Brian Travers. Remember, the coworker that she had that fling with. The two decided to run a late night errand and they went to Walmart. And surveillance cameras actually captured Jennifer and Brian shopping together. And they left Walmart at around 12:30 a.m. And now 12:30 a.m., it was Monday, September 16th. Brian later told police that after they left the store, Jennifer drove him back to his place, helped him carry some of his bags inside. He gave her a goodnight kiss, and then they headed their separate ways. According to Brian's account, he watched her car drive off into the night, and that was the last time that he or any of her friends ever saw Jennifer alive. Sometime after returning to her apartment, which was empty at around 1:30 a.m., Jennifer called her ex-boyfriend Dave in Montana. He was working overnight as a TV weatherman. Clearly, she has a thing for weathermen. Anyway, phone records confirm that this call ended at 1:39 a.m., so it didn't last long. Dave would later say that Jennifer sounded normal, she wasn't distressed, and that she even mentioned plans for them to meet up in Dallas in December. Investigators believe that within minutes of hanging up with Dave, likely at around 2 a.m., Jennifer answered her door to someone she knew. According to the investigation, there were no signs of forced entry at her apartment. A downstairs neighbor in the complex later provided a very critical timeline clue. This neighbor was awakened at around 2 a.m. by a loud noise, like a sudden thump, and it was from the apartment above, which was Jennifer's apartment. Now, this neighbor got up, got a glass of water, and then heard two voices, a man and a woman, or at the very least, he heard two people. And they were having what sounded like a heated argument in Jennifer's kitchen area. Now, the neighbor couldn't discern what was being said. You know, it just kind of sounded like muffled anger. The argument moved from the kitchen toward the living room, corresponding to sounds of movement. Then the neighbor described hearing a, quote, steady rhythmic hitting sound, end quote, or thumping that lasted for approximately 3 to 4 minutes. He assumed at 2 a.m. and probably stumbling around his apartment to get some water that there was a couple being intimate upstairs after a very heated argument. Well, after that, the neighbor went to sleep and no one was none the wiser about what had gone on in that apartment until just a few days later. Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns, and April is Financial Literacy Month, an entire month dedicated to taking control of your money. Because honestly, no one really taught me how to manage money growing up. I didn't learn about investing until I was well into adulthood. But what I love about Acorns is that it makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future in just 5 minutes. I know, April is an entire month, but you don't need an entire month to learn. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns recommends a diversified portfolio that matches you and your goals. You can start with just your spare change. And you don't need a lot of time. Setup takes just 5 minutes because I know that your time is precious. And if financial wellness has ever felt out of reach, Acorns makes it simple, giving your money a chance to grow without the overwhelm. Personally, using Acorns gave me the confidence to stop putting it off and just start. And that peace of mind is completely worth it. Sign up now and join over 14 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $25 billion with a B dollars with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/militarymama or download the Acorns app to get started today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/militarymama.
Ladies, you'll end up shopping for your guy's deodorant, right? So try Degree's Original Cool Rush. You see, last year, Degree changed the formula, and men were mad. One guy even started a petition. So Degree admitted they messed up and brought the Original Cool Rush scent back. It's clean, crisp, and actually smells like someone you want to cuddle. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So toss one in your cart and find out why it's the best-selling men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory.
Okay, so let's talk about Monday, September 16th. It was Jennifer's day off, but someone at the station reached out to her to see if she could cover for a sick colleague. Jennifer typically responded, but this time she didn't. And that was immediately odd to coworkers. But they figured, hey, maybe something came up with Jennifer and we'll just leave her alone. But by Tuesday, September 17th, after coworkers contacted Jennifer to check up on her and she didn't respond, well, they grew concerned as everyone knew that Jennifer was a single woman and she didn't really have family in town or other friends yet. Colleagues Jennifer Lauren and Brian Travers, they decided to do a welfare check. So they headed to her apartment complex, and outside they saw Jennifer's car parked, kind of like in her apartment complex. So assuming that, maybe she was out with someone or resting, I don't think that they knocked, they just left. But by Wednesday morning, September 18th, when Jennifer actually missed scheduled work and she was a no-show, no-call, well, her newsroom knew something was very wrong. KRBC News Director Toby Dagenhart called Jennifer's apartment complex manager and was like, hey, we're worried about Jennifer. Can you do a welfare check? So at around 2 p.m. that day, the apartment manager entered Jennifer's second floor unit with a maintenance key. And the scene that unfolded was every colleague, loved one's, apartment manager's worst nightmare. Just inside the front door, the manager spotted blood on the carpet, and it was near the bed that was set up in Jennifer's living area. So I don't know if she lived kind of like in a studio. But anyway, red drag marks then trailed along the carpet, leading from that bed towards the bathroom at the back of the apartment. Following that gruesome trail, the manager found Jennifer's lifeless body draped over the bathtub. She was face down, bent over the side of the tub with the upper part of her body in the water, and her blonde hair was partially submerged. Jennifer was fully clothed, still wearing a t-shirt and boxer-style shorts. It was immediately clear that she had been dead for days. Police arrived promptly to the grim scene. Paramedics confirmed what the manager already suspected. Jennifer Servo was dead, likely for at least 48 hours by that point. Later that day, Abilene authorities officially pronounced Jennifer dead, and they began their homicide investigation. An initial examination revealed that Jennifer had been brutally beaten and strangled. There were multiple blunt force injuries to her head, she had been bludgeoned, and there were telltale signs of manual strangulation around her neck. The positioning of her body and the evidence at the scene told a story of a very violent struggle. Investigators believed that Jennifer was attacked in her bathroom area, likely near or on her bed, knocked to the floor and strangled, likely to the point of death. The attacker then dragged her body roughly 30 feet to the bathroom and heaved her over the bathtub edge. Maybe this was in an attempt to wash away evidence or even to just stage the scene. Importantly, though, the medical examiner later noted that there was no water in Jennifer's lungs, meaning that she was already dead before her face was pushed into the bathtub. And remember, the bathtub was filled with water. The apartment itself showed clear signs of a chaotic fight. There were items overturned, and it looked as if the assailant had rummaged through or at least tried to grab as many things as possible in a panic after the murder. Police collected what evidence they could: blood samples, fingerprints, hair fiber evidence, and this was all from around the apartment. Unfortunately, though, processing the scene was complicated by one thing. Jennifer had a pet cat, Mr. Binks. The cat had been alone with Jennifer's dead body for several days, and his fur was scattered everywhere, intermingling with potential forensic evidence, which caused a problem. Investigators later had to painstakingly distinguish between human hairs and cat hairs, which I don't assume is really that difficult, but maybe. And of course, though, it did take a lot of time. Still, crucial evidence was noted. Aside from the obvious blood and DNA traces, some of which would later be matched to known individuals, there were certain items missing from Jennifer's apartment. Jennifer's purse, Jennifer's cell phone, her keys, and randomly a couple of DVDs. And it was noted in the investigation that missing was Saving Private Ryan and Sex and the City. Anyway, that's kind of weird. The presence of these specific missing items, or the absence of them, suggested the killer might have taken them, possibly maybe to make the attack look like a burglary, although I don't know who would steal Sex and the City tapes. But anyway, some of the evidence, though, makes sense. For example, the missing cell phone. However, right off the bat, police didn't believe robbery was the motive because the rest of the apartment had a lot of valuable things, such as TV and radios. Anyway, one early puzzling detail in the case involved Jennifer's university library card. About a year after her murder, on November 6, 2003, someone checked out a few library books from the University of Montana's Mansfield Library, and they used Jennifer's library card, or at least her account. Now, the books were reportedly on philosophy. Now, this is super odd. It did raise some eyebrows, wondering, was it a clue? Did her killer who stole her purse and her wallet take her library card and then use it? Or was it just a clerical error? To this day, details remain unexplained publicly, but investigators have noted it as just a simple curiosity. It has never been confirmed to relate directly to the crime, and no obvious leads came from it. So, when news of Jennifer's murder broke on September 18th, the reaction was one of shock and anguish. At KRBC TV, Jennifer's colleagues were listening to the police scanner when they heard a call come in about a possibly deceased female at Jennifer's address. And there was one actual assigned editor who heard it and let out a scream in horror. Upon learning that Jennifer had been murdered that day, the station canceled its regularly scheduled 5 p.m. newscast. Instead, at 6 p.m., the anchors went on air with breaking news of Jennifer's death, delivering the devastating report about their very own coworker. Anchor Downing Bowles struggled to keep his voice steady as he informed viewers that Jennifer Servo, the bright young reporter who had just joined their team, she had just been discovered murdered. It was an unpredictable and heartbreaking moment for the small news community in Abilene. The police investigation into Jennifer Servo's murder began immediately, and it was intense. Abilene police detectives David Atkins and Jeff Bell were among the lead investigators assigned to the case. In those first hours, the crime scene was combed for clues, and Jennifer's body was sent for autopsy. By the next day, September 19th, 2002, preliminary autopsy results confirmed what was apparent. Jennifer died from manual strangulation accompanied by blunt trauma to the head. The timing of the death was placed on the 16th, the same night that the neighbor heard that argument. From the get-go, detectives theorized that Jennifer likely knew her killer. Her apartment door had been found locked and undamaged, indicating no forced entry. And the neighbor's account of hearing two people arguing supported the idea that she was with someone that she allowed inside at 2 a.m. Because if it was an intruder, she would have just been yelling help, This steered the investigation towards Jennifer's inner circle of friends, her acquaintances, and especially any recent romantic partners. Within days, police collected DNA samples and fingerprints from at least 6 people who were close to Jennifer. They also compiled the timeline of Jennifer's final 24 hours, and they were interviewing coworkers like Brian Travers and friends like the ex-boyfriend who she spoke to on the phone just a few minutes before that argument broke out. Very quickly, 2 individuals emerged as the primary persons of interest in this particular case. Ralph, Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, and Brian Travers, her coworker. These were the 2 men known to have had intimate relationships with Jennifer in just the weeks before her death. Now, police stopped short of calling them suspects publicly at the time, but it was clear that the investigation was focusing on them. As one APD spokesperson noted, it's standard procedure to, quote, look hardest at those closest to the victim, end quote, especially in a case like this. And in Jennifer's case, all roads of suspicion led to either an ex-lover or a current love interest, Brian Travers, the coworker, but not because of anything else, but because he was the last person to have seen Jennifer alive, which automatically made him a person of interest. From the outset, however, Brian was fully cooperative with police. He came forward immediately and gave detailed statements about Walmart and everything else that happened that night. He even walked investigators through Jennifer's apartment to kind of help identify if anything was missing or out of place. Investigators did note that several personal items were gone, and that was with the help of Brian. And they asked Brian if he knew anything about those missing items, and he said he did not. Brian also voluntarily provided his own DNA sample to the crime lab. Now, results did show his DNA was on Jennifer's bed, which was not surprising since they had been intimate recently. Now, this evidence did not implicate him in foul play in any way. It merely confirmed that the two had a consensual encounter at some point. In line with that, Brian never tried to hide his relationship with Jennifer. He openly acknowledged their brief romance and that she had told him she just wanted to be friends. From all accounts, Brian's behavior in the aftermath was that of a grieving friend with nothing to hide. He was reportedly devastated by Jennifer's death. In fact, when Jennifer's family held her funeral in Montana, Brian flew from Texas to Montana to attend, even standing alongside her loved ones in mourning. Brian maintained contact with Jennifer's mom in the years following Jennifer's death, periodically emailing her to ask if there were any updates on the case. Investigators scrutinized Brian's background, and they did not find a history whatsoever of violence or any type of criminal behavior. One colleague described Brian as wholesome and somewhat socially awkward, but far from violent, which really, it doesn't mean anything, but I'm just telling you what I researched. Over time, Abilene detectives grew convinced that Brian had no part to do with Jennifer's murder. He was formally cleared as a suspect after he fully cooperated and passed several inquiries. Former prosecutor Kelly Siegler, who reviewed this case years later, summed it up by saying that Brian's only mistake was falling too hard for Jennifer. In the eyes of law enforcement, Brian Travers was a tragic footnote, a young man who lost someone he cared about, and not in any way her killer. On the other hand, Ralph Sepulveda quickly became the prime suspect in Jennifer's murder, both in the eyes of the investigators and Jennifer's family. Ralph's motive and opportunity were apparent. He was a jilted ex-boyfriend, recently spurned and possibly simmering with anger. And let's not forget, he was a mooch, okay? He lived only a few miles from Jennifer's apartment, but he also had a disturbingly known penchant for choking during sex, a fact not lost on detectives considering Jennifer died by strangulation. Police brought Ralph in for questioning within days of the murder. Initially, Ralph was cooperative. He agreed to interviews and he let officers search his apartment and vehicle, which good on him, right? He also provided DNA samples. Now, side note, police have never revealed if Ralph's DNA was found at the crime scene, which I'm assuming that it would be found there because he lived there with Jennifer just a few months before her murder. During Ralph's interview, he told authorities that he had an alibi. On the night from September 15th into the morning of the 16th, he was home. He said that Sunday he had watched Sunday Night Football alone, and then he went to bed at 10:30 p.m. However, the thing with that alibi is that it had a huge problem. No one could corroborate that he was home alone, right? Detectives found Ralph's demeanor during questioning, though, to be peculiar and dispassionate. Jeff Bell, who interviewed Ralph, noted that Ralph, quote, wasn't the least bit emotional, end quote. And he wasn't emotional upon learning that Jennifer was dead. And in fact, according to Bell, when he told Ralph, like, hey, listen, Jennifer was murdered, Ralph's initial response was a flat, oh, that sucks. He didn't even ask a follow-up question. He didn't ask how or why, or he didn't even express shock. He was almost unnaturally calm in his reaction to learn that the woman he just lived with was dead. As the investigation proceeded, Ralph's cooperativeness waned. He declined to take a polygraph test when it was requested, which really isn't proof of guilt, but it didn't help alleviate doubt that he, could be a suspect. And when detectives later saw a second, more in-depth interview with Ralph, he refused to talk further.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
My name is Lily, and I've had hidradenitis suppurativa, HS, for years. I finally found some relief since taking Cosentyx. Relief means I can show up more.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe hidradenitis suppurativa, HS. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your dermatologist about Cosentyx.
Meanwhile, more concerning information about Ralph trickled in. Detectives learned that before meeting Jennifer, Ralph might have had legal issues in Arizona. One source indicated that he had faced accusations of child molestation, including an allegation of sexually abusing a 15-year-old family member. That is really shocking. It's unclear what became of those charges, but this history, if true, I'm not saying that they did paint a darker picture of Ralph's character. Additionally, as they dug into the timeline, investigators discovered that Ralph had made a few curious gestures right around the time of the murder. The first thing he did was he wrote a love letter to his ex-fiancée in Montana, the same woman he had left for Jennifer. In that letter, dated very close to Jennifer's death, Ralph told his ex-girlfriend or his ex-fiancée that he no longer had any feelings for Jennifer and that he still loved her, the ex-fiancée. Now, this seemed odd. He had not contacted that ex-fiancée in over a month after their breakup, and suddenly, after Jennifer was dead, he was professing love again, all the while Jennifer's murder was in the news. Detectives suspected that this letter that he wrote might have been a ruse, attempting to create some sort of impression that he wasn't upset about the breakup with Jennifer, even though he was over there begging her to return with him. But listen, don't worry. The cops weren't the only ones who thought Ralph was full of crap. The ex-fiancée, she thought that the letter was weird as well. She said it was out of the blue and, quite honestly, insincere. But perhaps the most telling of all the weird things that Ralph did, guess what he did? Guess what he did after Jennifer's murder? 10 days after Jennifer's death, he packed up his items and moved out of Abilene. Then he re-enlisted in the army, returning to active duty. That's real weird, but maybe it isn't. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. In leaving, he also cut off all ties with the people who knew both him and Jennifer, and he didn't even attend Jennifer's funeral, nor did he ever reach out to her family to offer his condolences. Now, to those who observed this behavior, it appeared that Ralph wanted to distance himself as much as possible from the entire situation. As Jennifer's father later bitterly noted, quote, "He's lived free all these years, and we've had those years without Jen," end quote. The family's suspicions squarely centered on Ralph from early on. Jennifer's mother, Sherry, stated plainly, quote, "I believe it was Ralph that killed her," end quote. Well, that's blunt. And Detective Bell later admitted, quote, "All the times that we interviewed him, he never said anything that made us think this wasn't our guy," end quote. Despite this strong suspicion, though, no arrest was made in 2002 or even now. The case that investigators were building was largely circumstantial. There was no eyewitness besides the vague sounds heard by the downstairs neighbor. And crucially, there was no forensic smoking gun at the time directly tying Ralph to the crime. If any unidentified DNA or fingerprints were at the scene, police have never publicly disclosed that information or matched it to Ralph. The early DNA evidence was complicated by the mixture of profiles, Jennifer's, Brian's, possibly others. And let's not forget about Mr. Banks. Prosecutors likely felt that they needed more than motive and suspicion to charge Ralph with murder, right? You have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it anyway. So frustratingly, the case remains open and unsolved. As years passed, Abilene police continued to work the case quietly. In 2004, the case received renewed attention with Crime Stoppers and media features, but still there were never any breaks. By 2013, 11 years after Jennifer's death, the lead detective, Jeff Bell, retired, with the case still being unsolved. Over time, Abilene PD has re-examined the Servo case multiple times. In 2014, officials announced that they were following new leads, though they never revealed what those were. They continue to periodically test and retest and retest and retest evidence with advancing forensic technology. In the 2020s, as DNA analysis techniques improved, investigators even sent old evidence to private labs for fresh testing, hoping that trace DNA or degraded samples might yield a profile that could conclusively implicate one person over the other. By the late 2010s, both of the original persons of interest had moved on with their lives. Brian had left Texas for a career elsewhere, and Ralph continued his life, reportedly at one point even living in Hawaii after his military service, so I'm not sure if he retired or not. Jennifer's family, meanwhile, continued to push for justice, frequently voicing their belief that there has been just one obvious suspect all along. Quote, "We feel he should be in prison for what he did," end quote. And that was what Jennifer's mom said. She also said, quote, "Whether he didn't mean to do it or not, we don't have our daughter anymore and he's free," end quote. Jennifer's father, Norm Olson, put it even more bluntly, quote, "I can't stand that someone thinks he's going to get away with this," end quote. For a long time, it seemed that person might actually get away with it, though. Jennifer Servo's murder sent shockwaves through both the local community in Abilene and her hometown in Montana. The idea that a young reporter could be slain in her own apartment just weeks after arriving was deeply unsettling. For her colleagues in the news industry, it was an intensely personal tragedy. Many of them learned of Jennifer's death in real time while they were listening to the newsroom police scanner. That day's newscast turned into memorials. Seasoned anchors struggled to maintain composure, reporting on the death of their coworker and friend. Downing Bowles later reflected that September 18th, 2002 was one of the worst days ever in the newsroom's history. The station even canceled one of its evening broadcasts out of respect, focusing instead on covering the tragedy and its aftermath. Beyond the newsroom, Abilene's public responded with an outpouring of grief and support. Jennifer had only been in town for 2 months, but as a TV reporter, her face was already familiar to many. Viewers who had seen her on air were stunned that such a violent crime could happen to a person that they had recently welcomed into their homes via the news. Police assured the public that it appeared to be an isolated incident, not a random attacker on the loose, right? Because everyone's always scared of that, implying early on that it was likely someone that Jennifer knew. But it nonetheless rattled people's sense of security. The case quickly became one of Abilene's most high-profile unsolved cases ever. Local media kept Jennifer's story alive with frequent updates, especially on anniversaries of her death. For instance, at the 1-year mark in 2003 and then at the 10-year mark in 2012, the Abilene Reporter News and TV stations, they ran reflective pieces interviewing her friends, former coworkers, and even police that were on the case asking about a status. These annual reminders reinforced that the community had not forgotten Jennifer. Nationally, Jennifer's murder drew the attention of the true crime and journalism communities. In 2003, America's Most Wanted featured Jennifer's case, broadcasting it to a national audience in hopes of generating any types of tips. In September of 2007, ABC's Primetime, on the anniversary of her death, they aired a segment titled, "She Could Have Gone Anywhere She Wanted To," and that segment detailed Jennifer's case and the renewed efforts to solve it. CBS 48 Hours Mystery also did an episode exploring Jennifer's murder, interviewing persons close to the case. Print and online media also took interest as well. Cosmopolitan magazine ran an article on Jennifer's story. Is Cosmo still a thing? I know it was in these years when I was growing up. And that article was specifically about underscoring the issues of dating violence and safety. And besides Cosmo, there have been true crime websites and forums that have dissected the known facts of Jennifer's case. Recently, Oxygen's investigative series Cold Justice and its companion press coverage, well, it's shown a spotlight back on Jennifer's unsolved case, bringing it to the attention of a new generation of true crime enthusiasts. Back in Montana, Jennifer's family and friends held their own tributes. Jennifer's body was cremated and a funeral service took place at Northridge Lutheran Church in her hometown of Columbia Falls. And that happened about 10 days after her murder. Around 300 people attended, a testament to how beloved Jennifer was back home. The church lobby was filled with photos of Jennifer through the years. Her as a baby, her as a high school cheerleader, her as a college graduate, and even her blue Columbia Falls High letter jacket and her green Army Reserves jacket. They were all on display next to each other in the lobby for everyone to remember Jennifer. Members of her Army Reserve unit performed a military honors service at the funeral, presenting an American flag to her mother, Sherry. The eulogy given by one of her journalism professors, Bill Knowles, highlighted how Jennifer was known and loved by everyone around her. At the funeral, family members spoke in tearful remembrance. Jennifer's sister, Krista's last words to her had been, quote, "I love you," and she expressed gratitude for those who were there. Jennifer's father, Norm, wrote a tribute that was read aloud, in which he wrote, quote, "I will never understand why my daughter was taken away from me," end quote. After the service, Jennifer's ashes were scattered over Flathead Lake, a place that Jennifer cherished in Montana. In the aftermath, the Servo family channeled their grief into memorializing Jennifer's legacy. They established the Jennifer Servo Memorial Scholarship at the University of Montana's School of Journalism, with the aim at helping other aspiring female journalists in their senior year of studies. Quote, "It's to help other struggling, starving students when they're getting ready to go out on their next new big adventure," end quote. Jennifer's mother explained what the scholarship was about. This scholarship has been awarded to multiple students over the years, keeping Jennifer's name alive in the community of young reporters that she once belonged to. On each anniversary of Jennifer's death, local Montana news outlets often run stories to remind the public that Jennifer's case is still unsolved and to honor Jennifer's memory. In 2012, the 10th anniversary, for example, NBC Montana featured the Servo family's efforts to keep Jennifer's story in the public's eye, and they highlighted the scholarship funds. Through the years, Jennifer's family has remained vocal. They do any interview that they're asked to do. They talk to the news stations, and they don't mince their word. They say that there is one suspect who has never been arrested. Indeed, law enforcement themselves have expressed that they have not given up. Quote, "Police, parents, and her former coworkers all said they believe this case will eventually be solved," end quote. And that was what one reporter noted. So you're probably wondering, it's 2025 as of this recording. What's the status? Well, Jennifer's case remains officially unsolved. However, there has been movement in the last several years. Notably, in 2023, the Abilene PD took the significant step of partnering with a true crime TV show called Cold Justice, and it's on the Oxygen Network. And they teamed up with them to invigorate this investigation. Cold Justice is led by former Texas prosecutor Kelly Siegler, and she works with local law enforcement to dig into unsolved cases. In Jennifer's case, Siegler and her team, including Detective Steve Spignola, coordinated closely with Abilene detectives like Jeff Cohen to re-examine all of the evidence and all of the witness statements and everything in Jennifer's case with a fresh set of eyes. So let me summarize that episode for you. Kelly Siegler agrees with the original investigation. She says there is clearly only one suspect. Well, of course, they can't show everything on TV, but after that collaboration, Abilene authorities felt that they had enough to seek an indictment. At the end of that Cold Justice episode, it was announced that the police and local prosecutor would be presenting the Jennifer Servo case to a grand jury, with Ralph as the target of that investigation. Now, essentially, the law enforcement declared they would actively seek charges against their prime suspect. But as of early 2025, the outcome of that effort remains uncertain, at least to the public. So who knows if they were just saying that, to kind of say something on that Cold Justice episode. The grand jury proceedings, as you might know, are typically secret, and no public announcement of an indictment has been made in the Servo case. But if an indictment is handed down, it could lead to an arrest warrant for the prime suspect. But until that happens, Ralph remains a free man, and there have never ever been any formal charges filed against him. Abilene police have not publicly named him or anyone else as the offender in Jennifer's case. They've simply never wavered from calling this an open investigation. All right, True Crime Army, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Let's keep Jennifer in our thoughts and pray that one day there might be justice for Jennifer. If you haven't already started following my new show, The Alternate, Inside America's Biggest Trials, go now. The Karen Reed trial is in full swing, and it is going to be, or has already been, a doozy. All right, everyone. Military Murder is a Mama Margot production. This episode's executive producers are Myrtle, Falcon 13, and Jen. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next time.